So, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you are situated in. So, as Amanda introduced me kindly, my name is Viraj, and today I'm going to talk about some of the awesome features that have been launched with PHP8. So, it's not much of a presentation for me. We are probably going to spend 95% of our talk by writing some actual code and checking the output and all those things. So without wasting some time, let's just try to understand what we are going to cover today. So most of the features that we are going to cover today are going to be around, say, PHP 8.0, 8.1, and 8.2. Obviously, due to our time constraints, we are not going to be able to cover all of those features. We are just going to cover around 6 to 7 notable features that I think are some of the best features that have been launched in the 8th version. And obviously, we are going to see live demo of some of these use cases. So it's going to be more of an hands-on talk and not really just a PPT presentation. So before we go ahead and try to get into some code, let me just tell you how we are going to proceed ahead with this. So as you can see on the left-hand side, there is a PHP Storm screen. And on the right-hand side, there is a Firefox browser. So what we are going to basically do is we are going to write some code on the left-hand side and obviously see the output on the right-hand side. What I've done is I have written some pseudo code for myself. So this is very simple old PHP code. It's nothing fancy. None of this code has the new PHP8 features. So I have implemented some use cases using some pseudo code. And then what we are going to do is we are going to update this old code with some new features that we have. So this is how most of our presentation is going to be. So again, like without wasting any of your time, let's just get into this right away. So the first feature that we are going to cover is about match expressions. So this is something new that has been launched with PHP 8.0. And if you see, this is a very simple PHP code. Before I start, I hope the font size and everything is good enough. Can you just reply back on chat with +1 plus or not, like whether the font size and the screen fonts are good enough or not? That would be really helpful. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. So yeah, this, as you can see on the left hand side, this is a very simple PHP code. We have a class here on the top. It is an empty class. The name of the class is the name of the class is task. As you can see, it is an empty class. It doesn't have anything. On line 7, we are instantiating the class, and basically this task variable is an object of the task class. Just below that, we have a very simple switch block wherein we try to match the task name. So we are trying to get the name of the task by doing a get underscore class for the task object. And then depending on what the name of the class is, we assign something to the type variable. So for example, case task. So if the name of the class is task, then the type variable has this small lowercase task in there. If the name of the class is line item, then the type is line item. And by default, if we are not able to match anything, then the type variable is assigned not set. And what we do is we just var_dum the variable. So it's a pretty simple thing. As I said, blank class and a simple switch block, which tries to identify the name of the task. So if I refresh this again, as you can see, we get this output string for task is the output, the var_dump of the type variable, which is correct because we have a class name of task, and that's what we are trying to match. And this is what we get as output. Now, suppose, for example, if I simply change the name of this class and refresh this again, we'll get line item for obvious reason because it is now matching this. And if we change this to demo, for example, there is no match, so it will return back not set. So a very simple PHP code. But if you still see this, we have around 10 lines of code here in a switch block, which in itself kind of is too much of code to just do like a simple match. We're simply trying to match the name of the class with something. So you have to write like a case, then assign it to a temporary variable, then write some breaks along with some default values and stuff like that. So this seems like too much of code to just do a simple task as this, right? Now, this is still an example, but in a real world example, in our real world application, we might have around, say, 5 cases and a default. So the switch block might just go on to be very lengthy. So with PHP 8.0, we have this new match expression that we can use to achieve such kind of task. So I'll just try to tell you. So what we'll do is we'll first just comment this out and let's start from scratch. So let's see, we want to assign all of this to type variable. So the keyword is match, as the name itself says match expressions, the keyword is match. And then we given what we want to match. So for us, we want to match the class of the task object. And then what we basically do is we now write the value, key value pair, basically what we want to match and what we want to return as a value. So for example, if the name is task, and if you want, and we want to return task, we just do simply like this. Or if the name is say line item, we just return back say line item. And by if you want to provide a default value, we can also provide a default value like this, and it will just simply set the default for this. So as you can see, around 10 lines of code are now replaced with simple 4 lines of code. So this is how easy it is. It's a very simple match expression, and you can do all this stuff. If I go back to my browser and refresh, we get not set for obvious reason because our class name is demo and we cannot match it. So if we go back to say a task, save it and refresh. Oops, let's just refresh, and yeah, we get task. Same if we do a line item, we'll get it as a line item as well. So as you can see, it's just not like less number of line of code, but it's also much more readable. Like in a switch block, we have to see, okay, this is a case, what are we doing in that case and all that stuff. But here it is much more readable. Like this is a match. Okay, so we are matching something. If it matches this, then we return this. If it matches this, then we return this. By default, we return this. So it's also more readable for us. So it's really a good addition to PHP8 language. And I think we all should go ahead and just replace our switch blocks with this match expressions as much as we can. Just a hat tip before we move on to another feature. Let's suppose we have this switch block, and I don't know about other editors, but if you are using PHP Storm, PHP Storm gives you automatically helpers to actually convert these switch blocks to match expressions. So the only thing you have to do is just do an option enter or an alt enter, depending on what keyboard you are using. And then you have to just click replace switch with match expression, and PHP Storm will do it for you automatically. So I don't know if VS Code has this, like it's an archaic old code editor, so I don't know if it does that. But for PHP Storm, it does provide all these match expressions and all this stuff. Like you can convert it automatically for you. So yeah, this is pretty much about match expression. Just to reiterate, I'm not going to be able to go through all the intricacies of every feature. So we are going to cover the main feature as fast as we can, so that we can cover at least 6 to 7 features in our time allotment. So yeah, this was about match expressions. Let's move on to our second feature, which is called as named parameters. So again, this is something new that has been added to PHP 8.2 as well. And this is also one of the useful features. I will try to explain you that in a bit. But before we go to that feature, let's just understand what kind of pseudocode we do have here. As you can see, again, we have a simple class, which is task, but it has some more information now inside this with some pseudocode. Obviously, we have a constructor here, which accepts 2 parameters, title and body. Just hold on. I hope everything's fine. Okay. Yeah, so we have a constructor here which accepts title and body. These are the 2 parameters that it accepts for the class. And there are 2 class properties on the top, as you can see, string title and string body. Both of them have a visibility of public. And what we basically do is whatever value is being passed to the constructor, we assign to this class property. So whatever value is assigned to this title variable is assigned to the title class property. As you can see here, we instantiate a new class and we pass in a title that is CakeFest 2022, and the body is this CakeFest is awesome. And if we do a var_dump of task title and task body, we'll get those title and body in the output. So let's just do that quickly. Yeah, so name parameter. So this is the title, as we can see, and this is the body. So because obviously we have assigned those variables right away. Now, because I'm using PHP Storm, I can see the hint of a variable here. If you can see, there is this title and then there is this body as well. So we have this hint of variables in PHP Storm, but many browsers probably don't have it, like VS Code and others, Vims and stuff like that, if you are not configured it. And also, if you are checking some code on GitHub, you might not also see all these things. So basically, it is not always available, the name of the parameter that we have. Also, this is a very simple example. We have a class in the same file and we are instantiating the same class in the same file. But this is not the case with our regular real life code, right? Most of the time we have a class in one file and then we probably instantiate that class in say 10 other files. And in 6 months, we might just forget like what is the name of the first parameter, what is the name of the second parameter. Or if we have 5 to 6 parameters, we might also forget like what are the orders, what is the order of that parameters, right? Like whether title is the first parameter or body is the first parameter and stuff like that. So it really becomes complicated as our app grows and more complex constructors or classes that we might have. So with name parameters, it really helps us in those things. So the way it works is we have to just type the name of the parameter like this and give it a colon. So I will just do that quickly. So this is the name of the parameter title, as you can see. This should match the name that is there in the constructor. So because this is title in small case, this is title in small case or lowercase. Same way here it is body in lowercase. That's why this is body in lowercase. Now we have to name the parameter, type the name of the parameter and a single colon, and that's what we have to do. Now this becomes a named parameter because we are giving it a name. But what is the difference? Like what I was doing before and what I'm doing now is not really different. Actually, I'm adding some more characters to my code, right? And if I refresh this will still work. As you can see, I get the title as CakeFest22 and body as this CakeFest is awesome. But the main thing is, if we now switch these parameters like this, suppose we pass in body, the name parameter of body as first and the name parameter of title as second, and the order here is opposite of that, it will still assign body to the second parameter and title to the first parameter. So if I refresh now again, I still get CakeFest 2022 title as the first as title, and CakeFest is awesome as body. Why? Because we have made them as a named parameter here. So PHP internally takes care of this. Even though you are passing body as the first parameter when instantiating a class, it will try to match this with the named parameter here body, and it will automatically assign it to the body rather than to the title. So suppose, just for example, if I didn't have these name parameters here and if I had done this by default, I refresh, this is what I would have got. Like this would have been the title and this would have been the body. But that is not the case if we use named parameters. So this is how it really helps us. And this is like a simple, small nitty-gritty feature. And it's really good to have this in our kitty bag to use it whenever we can. Now, before I go to next feature, I just want to aware you like this feature is so simple and so easy that most of us can abuse the use of these features. What I personally think is we shouldn't use this feature in all of our classes and everywhere. This should be preserved for some special use cases. So for example, if say we have a class with say 5 to 6 parameters and maybe a couple of them are to be allowed nulls and stuff like that, or optional parameters as well. So in that case, it makes sense to use these named parameters. If your class has say only 2 or 3 parameters for the constructor, then I don't think, or even for a function, I don't think we should be falling back to these named parameters. The one place where you should definitely not use named parameters is when you're instantiating or using methods from a third-party composer package. The reason being that many composer packages are being maintained by third-party developers, and they can change the name of those parameters out of the blue, like overnight. And that would be a big problem for your project because you would have to go back to all of your code and change the name of those parameters again. So ideally, this should be only used for internal classes where the function method names or the constructor method names are themselves a bit complex or have like 5 to 6 parameters, and maybe some of them are optional or not optional. But that is where I would try to use this feature rather than using it all across the board. And just to be sure, you can use this in any method. This is not just limited to a constructor. You can if task has say a method like this, say public function description or something like that, you can use, and it say accepts a parameter as task. You can use those variables. You can use a name parameter for this method as well. So it is not limited to a constructor. You can use them pretty much on any method of a class. So yeah, this was regarding named parameters. Uh, and yeah, let's go back. Let's go to our another. Let's go proceed to our next features, which is called as property promotion, or you can call it as constructor property promotion. Let me drink a couple of water. Yeah. So constructor property promotion. If you see, we again have some pseudocode here. This is nothing new. This is, if you observe it carefully, this is exactly what we had in the named parameters. After assigning the named parameters, we have a class task with two class properties, title and body, with public, visibility, and string type. We are accepting those two parameters in constructor and assigning them to the class properties. Then we're instantiating the class with named parameters, and then we are simply var dumping the task object. So it is exactly as what we had in the previous file, nothing different as such. And if I go back and let's not refresh, but let's just go to property promotion. So if you see, we are var dumping an object. We are var dumping the object.
We began discussing the need for. We began discussing.
Hello. Hello. Should I continue or was?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. I think somebody accidentally turned on their mic. You're good.
Okay, great. Sorry. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah. Okay. So as I said, this is exactly the same class that we had in the previous file, and once we instantiate the class, we are var dumping the object. And on the right hand, you can see this is the task object with title as CakeFest 2022. The property title has CakeFest 2022, and the property class property body has the value this CakeFest is awesome. So let's just understand property promotion, or I can say constructor property promotion here. You see, we have this. So we have to focus on this part right now, and then we'll understand it a bit more in detail. This is one of my favorite features that has been launched with PHP 8.0. So I really love this. So you see, we are kind of repeating ourselves, like we are accepting two parameters. Then we are assigning the values of those two parameters from temporary variable to those two class properties, title and body. And we have to also define those two class properties at the top of the class. So what if there was some way to do all of this stuff in this constructor method definition itself and get rid of all of these 4 lines of code? Now here we only have two parameters. So it's just like two properties at the top and two properties here. What if we had say 5 properties in a constructor? Then it would have been say 5 lines of code at the top and 5 lines of code inside the constructor here to assign them. So with constructor property promotion, we can actually do this in this constructor method definition itself. So let's just see how we can do that. First of all, let's just get rid of these two properties. Then let's just get rid of these two assignments as well. And what we have to do is we have to just play around here. First thing, let's just assign them their type, which was string. So let's just assign them string. This is not compulsory, but just because we had string at the top, I assigned them. You can do so without assigning a type as well. Now, the way constructor property promotion works is you have to give it a visibility. So for example, it was public for us. So I will just assign a public visibility to title and a public visibility to body as well. So anything more? No, this is it. This is constructor property promotion. Now, what happens inside the hood is what PHP does is whenever you assign an visibility to this parameter, what PHP does inside the hood is it will create this class property by the name of title and visibility of public and type of string. So it will create this class property under the hood so that we don't have to actually go and define it at the top like we did just a little bit before. So this will PHP under the hood will just define this property automatically for the task class. And it will also assign the value that has been passed here to that property. So it does two things automatically. It does define all the things that we did here on the top, and the code that we had here for $this title, it also does that automatically once we assign a visibility to this variable here. So those 4 lines of code, they still happen, but PHP does it automatically for us. Now, if I go here and refresh, I will still get the same output because PHP does that for us now. So this is constructor property promotion. This really helps us to clean up our code a lot. So as you can see, title is Cakefist 2022 and body is this Cakefist is awesome. So PHP does all this thing for us automatically. Again, as I said, this doesn't need to be something that you have to compulsory do. Like you can do public $title as well, and if you refresh, this will still work. So that's how it works. Again, another thing is you don't need to do this for all the properties. So you can simply do something like this as well. Suppose you only want constructor property promotion for title and not for body. So you can do that as well. And you refresh, you'll get this. So obviously we are not assigning body anywhere. So this is not constructed by PHP from inside the hood. So you only get title. So this is still valid code. You can have something like this, like $this body equal to $body and stuff like that. You can still have this by defining the body class property at the top. But obviously it just makes sense to have all of them constructed directly by PHP from the property promotion thing. So yeah, this is, I think, one of my favorite features from PHP 8.0, along with the combination of the next feature that we are going to see. So this is really helpful in terms of normal class instantiation as well as data transfer objects. So data transfer objects is where this really shines a lot. And when we compare this with the next feature that we are going to cover, like it really gives us a bunch of things under the hood directly and saves us from a lot of code to write. So yeah, this was constructor property promotion. And now what we're going to see is read-only properties, which is our next feature. So again, if you see, this is the pseudocode that we have. And if you observe it carefully, this is exactly the same code that we had from the last file after doing at the end of the last file. We have a constructor property promotion here. And we have a class task, which does constructor property promotion. Same, we pass title and body. And let's say for now, we just validate the task title. So let's just get to this output quickly. So yeah, we have this Cakefest 2022 as a title as we're passing here. So, and we also have activated constructor property promotion. So let's understand read-only properties. Now, before going to read-only properties, let's just understand a bit about data transfer objects. So in data transfer objects, you typically transfer data between 2 classes or 2 objects using a read-only data transfer object. So the responsibility of a data transfer object is to simply pass information. It shouldn't do any action like such. So in an ideal scenario, what we would do is we'll create a new task, and suppose we want to pass on this information somewhere, we would just pass in like this. Like if someone wants to read through this information, they can simply do read through task title. But the problem here is that anybody from outside the class after instantiation can also actually go ahead and update the public variables on the task class as well. As you can see, someone was able to update the title from outside the task class just after instantiating it. Why this was possible is because we had it as a public variable, the title. So suppose we get this as protected. So if we do this, then obviously someone can't update it. But the problem here is we can't even read it. So suppose if I comment this and try to read this task title, I still cannot read it because it is a protected variable. So the only way to do this is we have to probably do a getter, say something like this. We add a getter for the title with a method called as get title. It should return $this title. So now if I do get title, I can do this and I can read the title now. But again, as you see, we are adding much more lines of code here. We have to add a getter for every property that we might have in the constructor to make this as a read-only property from outside the class. So with PHP 8.1, this is not in 8.0, but 8.1. Okay. So with PHP 8.1, we can actually do this by using a read-only property. So the way it works is, let's just get rid of this code, the getter. Let's just go back to making this as public. Now, again, as I can see, let's just try to see here. Yeah, if I refresh, I can access the title because it is a public, but let's just make this read only. So this is the keyword, which is called as read only keyword. You have to just assign it before the variable name. So read only, we have made both of them. Now, if I dump the title, I can still read it, But if I go back and try to update this title here, if I try to update this, I cannot do that. PHP will throw an error. You cannot modify a read-only property task title, because the reason being we have made this property as a read-only property. So this is something that is really useful. It helps us to get rid of all the getters and setters that we might be using and still keep the variables as public, so that anyone can read the variables, but they cannot really go back and update those variables. So this is something that is really, really useful in terms of data transfer objects, but also in other use cases where you want some properties to be readable by everyone, but not to be able to write to them. So yeah, this is one of my favorite features. And as I said, because there is also constructor property promotion, so along with that read-only properties, this really packs a punch, and you can have various and very advantageous use case in this. This is much more readable, and obviously it helps us to get rid of a lot of lines of code. Let's go to our next feature, which is read-only classes. Now, this is not much different. This is just an extension of read-only properties. So let's just quickly get through this. So suppose, as you can see, we have the same code from the end of the file, from the end of the last file. We have a class task with read-only properties. We are instantiating them, and we are dumping the task. So let's just quickly see the output, and this is what we get, which is normal. So suppose in a use case, in a real life scenario, you have say five parameters. Okay, so it doesn't make, this is much better than what we would do in PHP 7 right now still, but we still have to repeat ourselves by writing read only to all of these properties, right? So with PHP 8.2, you can get rid of this read only keyword in the properties as well. So just to reiterate myself, this is only available in PHP 8.2 for the read-only class. Read-only properties are available in PHP 8.1, but what I'm going to show now with read-only class is only available in PHP 8.2. So what I would do is I would just get rid of all these read-only properties, and I will make this class as read-only. So this is what it does. Just ignore this red mark because I have not updated my PHP Storm to 8.2. This is giving an error. But yeah, once you make this class as read-only, PHP internally will make all the properties on this constructor as read-only. You don't have to explicitly specify read-only on each and every property. You can just, PHP does this under the hood for you. So let's just get rid of this property because we have not instantiated them. And if I refresh, I can see this still works because we have a read-only class. And let's say if I try to assign, like update the task title now, and I go and refresh, I get error that cannot modify read-only property task title. So again, just to reiterate, this doesn't make the class read-only, doesn't do anything to the class. What it does is it assigns read-only property individually to all these properties on the constructor. So PHP does that internally for us. So if you have a data transfer object, this is really useful. You can just make a class read-only, and you don't really need to, like, this is pretty much it for a data transfer object. This is all the code that you would need. Like, you accept some parameters on the constructor which are read-only, and they have a visibility, so they are not writable from outside, and because they're visible, they're automatically assigned to class properties with those names. And like, it really saves us a lot of code. I cannot reiterate myself enough on this. So this is read-only properties. I know I'm almost time, so I'm just gonna quickly cover the next feature, which is the null safe operator. This is gonna take around 5 minutes. So this is going to be a bit different, a little bit. Again, this is one of my favorite features after all the read-only and constructor property promotion thing. This is another feature that I like, and it really helps in like real world use cases. So again, let's just go through this pseudocode quickly. We have a class task. It's a bit different here. We have a constructor where we accept two properties again, title and body. Here we also have them a default body, default title, and default body. We are not going to really use them much, but we just have assigned a default title and default body to them. If you observe closely, this is not a read-only class, and these are not read-only properties. It doesn't matter, but I'm just trying to point out these are not read-only. These are just normal properties with constructor property promotion. Then we have a method called as getLineItem, which returns an instance of the lineItem class. So getLineItem is a method on the task class, which returns an instance of the lineItem class. Just below, we have a lineItem class, which itself has a description method, which returns a simple string. This is a lineItem. And what we do is we instantiate a new task, and then we try to dump something. So what are we dumping? We are trying to get a get line. We are calling the get line item on the task class. So basically we are calling this, which will return the new line item instance. And then we call a description method on the new line item instance, which is this. So it should return this is a line item string. So if it is still a little bit confusing, you just see the output. So this is what we get as output, because on the task object, we are calling the get line item, and then we are calling the description method on the line item instance. So this is what we get, which is pretty straightforward, and this is how it should work. But suppose in a real world application, we are not going to instantiate a class like this, right? This is probably going to come from your cake PHP entities. This might be, say, a bunch of entities, like a task may have, one has too many line items, and this is probably going to be a collection of cake PHP entities, which you are going to loop over and return every entity. So in that case, whenever database is involved, there is a very high probability that a database record is not present, and you might get an empty array, or you might return null. So something like this is very much possible whenever you are using, whenever you're fetching some records from the database. So in that case, if I refresh this, I will get a fatal error, which is obviously call to a member function description on null. Why? Because we are calling this method and it is returning null now, and we're trying to call the description method on the null value, which is obviously correct. We cannot do that. So ideally, what we would do is we would handle this use case with something like this, say line item, sorry. So task get line item, and if this is true, like if we get a line item, we'll go ahead and var dump the line item description method. But if line item is not available, then we will simply var dump no line item. And if you go back and refresh, yeah, we need to comment this and we go back and refresh. Yeah, that's what we get. Because we are returning null, the else loop is executed, which returns back no line item. But this is still much more line of code. And again, I hate if else loop as much as I can. And if I can get rid of them, I do get rid of them. So with null safe operator, we can actually get rid of this if else loop. So we are almost there. So this is how it works. So we will just add a null safe operator here. This is again PHP 8.2. You can do this from PHP 8.2. We have to put in a question mark here. So this is basically the epitome of null safe operator. We'll just comment this out for now, the if else loop, the if else block. So what this does is, whenever we add this null safe operator, what it does is it checks whether get line item is returning a null. If get line item is returning a null, then this will simply halt the execution here, and it will return null. But in the case get line item returns a new instance of line item, it will just go ahead and call the description method. So if you go back and refresh this, we get a null here, obviously. Why? Because we are returning null here. This operator handles that gracefully and returns a null back and halts the further execution. So if we comment this, if we return a new line item, it will go back and actually go ahead and call the description method. And obviously we don't want to return null, right? If it returns null, we don't want to output null. So we'll just fall back to our old PHP code and we'll just do something like this. And this will be our exact output that we had with the if else loop. So if it is returning null, we have no line item. But if it is not null, we'll get the actual output. And again, this is not just one time that you can use. You can use this n number of times in a chain methods. So you can add it at the first parameter. If you had like more chain method to descriptions, like say first paragraph, and description is an entity in itself, then you can again assign it here as well. So you can add it not just one time, two time, but n number of times in all of your code basically. So this is another very useful in real life world cases whenever you are actually displaying something on the UI and stuff. So I think I'm almost on time. So these are about 6 features that we have covered for PHP 8. And just to give you a couple of more details, as we might not have time for question answer, you can just ask me on CakeFest Slack channel, or you can tweet me here or just email me to this email and I will be happy to answer you. And just a bit about myself, I work for Harbor Compliance. We are based out of US, and we are also hiring Cake PHP developers right now with fully remote. So if you are interested, do get in touch with us at this email ID, and it would be really great to work with any of you are interested. So that's pretty much for me. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and Amanda, you can take over from here.